So you know that we generate power in South Africa using coal. We've got big gas turbines that are operating quite a lot in South Africa to make up for the big shortfalls in coal production and electricity from coal production. You could also, I suppose, have nuclear power stations. We've got Koeberg, but what about using thorium? Yep, I haven't a clue what it is either. It's an element, it's a chemical element, and it's being held up as a possible solution to South Africa's energy crisis. I'm joined this evening by Chris Yelland, the energy expert. We'll chat to him in just a moment. He is with EE Publishers, but also Trevor Blench. Trevor Blench is the chief executive of Steenkampskraal Thorium. That's a big mouthful. What is thorium, Trevor?
Thorium is an element with atomic weight 232. And it is mildly radioactive and could serve as a nuclear fuel to replace uranium or to work alongside uranium in nuclear reactors.
What is the significance of atomic weight 232 versus what's uranium's atomic weight?
Uranium, there are several isotopes, 235 and 238 are the most important ones.
So what's 232 significance?
Nothing really, except the fact that thorium is a fertile element. And so by the addition of one neutron, it can become a nuclear fuel, which is extremely powerful.
Well, why then do we know nothing about thorium up until now? I think it's been sort of chucked away as a result of some other process.
Yes, the atomic age isn't very old. It only started 50 to 60 years ago. So research into radioactive materials is still relatively new. Also, unfortunately, in the beginning, they were mainly devoted to military purposes, which was tragic. But now thorium presents us with an opportunity to develop nuclear power which is safer and cleaner than the previous history.
Okay, so it's a safer and cleaner alternative to uranium, which has military purposes. Could thorium be used in a military context, or is it not?
Very difficult.
Okay, so it's not significantly volatile for that.
The uranium fuel cycle produces plutonium and minor actinides in the waste. And plutonium can be used to make bombs, and minor actinides are radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years.
Okay.
This is the biggest advantage of thorium. In the thorium fuel cycle, after using it to generate power, there is no plutonium in the waste, and there are no minor actinides in the waste. So the waste management problem with thorium is very dramatically reduced as compared to the uranium fuel cycle. It's also very sustainable. The volume, the quantity of uranium in the world might last for 50 or 100 years, but there's 4 times more thorium in the world than uranium, and there is thorium in many, many countries.
Where do you find it? I mean, is it a byproduct of uranium production? Is it a byproduct of some other kind of production?
No, it's found in heavy mineral sands, and it's a byproduct of the mining of zircon, ilmenite, rutile, heavy mineral sands like at Richards Bay Minerals.
So it's the sort of stuff that we would use in paints. This is a byproduct of that. And up until now, it's gone onto the waste heap.
Yes.
Okay, so it's sitting there. Chris Yelland, what do you make of thorium?
Sounds too good to be true, but I'd like to ask Trevor, how many commercial reactors using thorium are in service in the world today at the moment?
Well, let me step back a moment. About 12 reactors were built back in the 1950s and 1960s, which used thorium as the fuel. This was in the United States and in Britain and in Germany. And we believe the thorium for those reactors came from Steenkampskraal. Steenkampskraal was mined by Anglo-American in the 1950s and 1960s. It's the highest grade thorium mine in the world. And we believe that most of that thorium came from Steenkampskraal.
Now, if thorium is the silver bullet to the energy problem, it was used in the 50s, why did they stop?
We believe the main reason was because there was a great need at that time for fissile material to make bombs, because there was the arms race, there was the Cold War, and there's not much naturally occurring fissile material around. So many nuclear power stations were built as plutonium factories. And the uranium fuel cycle suited that purpose.
Chris Yelland says this sounds too good to be true. What's your response to that?
Well, now India is leading the world when it comes to the commercialization of thorium as a fuel. And they have built a reactor which this year will come on stream, this year I believe, that will use thorium in a commercial way. So it's being done. It's no longer a pipe dream. It is true now.
So the Indians will be the first country in the world to utilize thorium since the Americans tried in the 1950s.
60s, yes.
1950s
yes.
and 60s. Chris Yelland, it's got a commercial application. The Indians are trying it, and they're clever guys, aren't they?
Well, what I've heard, Bruce, and I must confess, I know very little about the technology, but what I have heard is that it is perhaps a decade away from, full commercial use, and it's a very promising technology and one that we should hold high hopes for. But the reality is that the nuclear industry is slow-moving. It's very highly regulated, and it's going to take time for this technology to prove itself and to become widely adopted. So I think it is a technology that will still emerge, but it's slow, and we need to give it some time.
What are the timeframes there, Trevor?
Well, I would like to say that we have invested in a company in Norway called Thor Energy. And
it's a good
Thor
name for a
Energy
Norwegian company, yes.
And for thorium.
Yes.
They started 10 years ago on a feasibility study for the use of thorium in existing reactors, in existing light water reactors as they're called. And after a 5-year feasibility study, they came to the conclusion that this was possible, it was realistic, and it could be done quite soon. So our company, Steenkampskraal Thorium Limited, invested in Thor Energy. And 2 years ago, we manufactured thorium fuel in Norway. We inserted that thorium fuel in the Halden reactor in Norway for a qualification procedure. It's a 5-year qualification program. 5 years because that is the residence time of fuel in a reactor, and the regulators who are observing this program want to observe it for the full 5 years before they license it. So we are generating power with thorium now as we speak. We've been doing it for 2 years. We're manufacturing more thorium pellets on a regular basis and putting them into the reactor. So 3 years from now, we expect we will have a license to commercialize, to sell thorium fuel to existing utilities, to existing commercial reactors.
Chris Yelland, energy, we can produce energy from many different sources. It ultimately comes down to cost, doesn't it?
That's right. But, as Trevor's pointed out, if one can use this in existing reactors, it's very exciting because it removes one of the major disadvantages of conventional nuclear fuels, and that is the high-level radioactive waste. So I see this as a great and promising technology, but I must just caution, the lead times for commercialization of nuclear reactors gets done country by country, different licensing regimes. So it's a long haul. And as has been pointed out, it's still at the experimental stage. A few more years to run, under regulatory supervision, and I'm sure that in due course it will become a technology, and it holds much promise for the world.
When we look at cost, I mean, per kilowatt hour, coal versus uranium versus thorium, how does it stack up?
Well, coal has various costs depending on whether it's clean coal or not clean coal. And the cost of clean coal is about double the cost of ordinary coal if one cleans the exhaust fumes. And I think burning coal is something that we must consider very seriously as a human race, because the
Germans have gone back from nuclear to burning coal. Maybe they'll stop off with thorium along the way. From an efficiency point of view, from a public perception point of view, you've got a couple of hurdles to come across. So the cost of thorium relative to clean coal versus uranium?
Similar.
So similar costs. We don't get a cost advantage. What is the advantage then?
Bruce, can I come in here?
Yes, sir.
Bruce, I think the major difference between coal-fired power station and nuclear reactor, in a nuclear reactor, the fuel is a small part of the cost. And it's really the capital cost or the interest on that capital cost which represents the ongoing cost over the years, and fuel is a small part of that. In coal, it's very different. The actual fuel cost is a major operating cost, and the capital cost is somewhat lower. But all in all, as I understand it, coal does come in at a cheaper levelized cost of electricity than nuclear. It all depends, of course, on the interest rate that you use, or the weighted average cost of capital. These things make a big difference in a heavily capital-intensive project. But the fuel costs in nuclear are relatively low, the running costs.
Chris Yelland, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We'll let Chris Yelland go. So we're looking at the advantages then. We want the cleanest possible, sustainable, cost-effective energy source for the future. Does thorium tick those boxes?
I believe it really does. If we look at the burning of coal, we burn billions of tons of coal every year to generate electricity for our economies. And burning coal, the mining and the burning of coal and the air pollution that results, the illnesses and diseases that are a consequence of the pollution, kills millions of people every year around the world. And thorium is very, very clean compared to that.
What are the risks? Clean. I mean, people who are paranoid about nuclear, rightly or wrongly, people are scared of nuclear, and that's because of its weapons application. Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, we saw the destructive power of nuclear energy. Thorium, what's going to be different from a PR perspective as far as environmentalists and safety campaigners are concerned?
Yes, several issues. Firstly, it is extremely difficult to make weapons with thorium. In theory, it's not technically impossible, but it's very, very difficult. Another thing is that thorium is a safer fuel than uranium. It increases the margins of safety in nuclear reactors. It doesn't dissolve in water, for instance, so it would not be disseminated into the sea. It has a higher melting point, so it's less likely to melt. There are certain operational characteristics like that. And then a big issue is the waste. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't like the idea of having toxic waste around for hundreds of thousands of years. And thorium dramatically reduces the waste issue.
Trevor Blench, we look forward to seeing how this pans out. Trevor Blench is the chief executive of Steenkampskraal Thorium, big investors in Norway looking to the feasibility. Indians are bringing it to market commercially either this year or next. Is it the future of energy? We've got something of a skeptic in Chris Yelland, who says it sounds too good to be true in the short term anyway. We watch the space closely. Thank you for watching. That's it from Tonight with Bruce Whitfield. Until next time, good night and goodbye.